In this video, I'm going to go through the process of how do I apply and what do I apply, which kind of the processing on the groups and on the buses. I'm beyond excited to announce that my brand new course, Psytrance Production and Sound Design, is available on my website. Everything you should know and understand how to boost your production to the next level. Visit www.eclipmusic.com/courses and sign up for the course that will change your production and craft up your career. Welcome to the new video. As you already heard, this video is going to be about the buses and the group channels and what type of processing I use and what is my approach regarding all of that together. Before we start, I need to explain my workflow and how do I connected everything, since I'm using the summing mixer, and my summing mixer can take up to 8 channels, which means I'm gonna have 4 stereo buses that are gonna go and feed the summing mixer, and then everything's going to be summed inside of the summing mixer, and then I'm gonna record back that signal on my DAW. Everything that's being summed into the summing mixer, I'm bringing back as I already said, and I have one channel over here which is called monitoring, and then I need to turn on the monitoring so I can hear. The main benefit behind this is that I'm listening always the end result, and I do not have that kind of a surprises when I export something from my DAW that I'm gonna hear a different results while it's going after it's being summed, and in DAW that I hear that there are certain differences. So now the difference between groups and buses. So I would say they are almost the same, but the difference is that we can use the groups for various different reasons, and the buses are mostly the channels that are going to be fed directly into the master channel. So in my example over here, I have the outputs which I connect and create in the Cubase, where I have bus 1 and 2, bus 3 and 4, bus 5 and 6, bus 7 and 8, and then I have the SPDIF. This is where I'm listening to my speakers. I don't want to go inside of explaining the whole system because that can be video by itself, but just imagine that this is only for listening, while I'm using these other 8 channels which are sent through the Apogee, which are external DA converters, and that signal from Apogee is being fed into the summing mixer. So now I would say these are my 4 buses, as these are the last one, and these 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8 are going to the master channel. So these are like the main channels behind or just after the master channel. While groups, even though I'm using the groups over here like kick and bass, drums, FXs and leads, even though this one I could call top end and this one I can call single shots. So for you just to be more clear about it. And then I have the leads where I have all the other leads or the repetitive sequences that are always in blue in my channels is going to be fed in that channel. Now I also have like a subgroups or the groups where, for example, I have this lead, just a second to find it, but let's say I have this one. This is the main theme of this track. So this is the folder where I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different layers of the same lead or the same theme in the middle of the track, and then all of them are going to be fed into the one subgroup which I call the main theme. The reason for you doing this is that I want to process maybe only this one, and I want to control the level or the loudness of the whole channel. I could also create VCA, but on VCA I can control only the with the fader, the loudness, but with the group I can also add an extra processing to it. And also, for example, for the purposes of the automation of the filter, because in most cases I'm using like the external filters, because if I use from the VST instrument and let's say that I use the cutoff position, I might use a distortion later on the processing, and that distortion after the filter will generate certain harmonic content as well, which is going to be after the filter, which means it's not going to cut all the high frequencies. In some cases I really want my melodies, leads and whatsoever to start from the very low frequencies, and that way control how they're gonna come into the track. And instead of having 5 different filters, I can just send them to one group and then use one filter, drew one automation, and it's gonna follow up all the channels that are under that group channel. So when it comes for the processing, I will say that it really depends how much of the processing I'm going to put, really depending on what part or what segment of the track creation I'm at. So if I'm at the beginning, I will strictly avoid as much as I can any group processing, anything on the kick and the bass, any EQing on the kick and the bass, compression whatsoever, because I'm really not sure will I keep exactly the same kick and the bass until the end of the track, because if the track is developing in one way, I might decide to change that kick in the bass whatsoever, and I really don't want to have any processing that after I send it to that group, it's gonna affect how it's gonna work. So some kick will have louder picks, some kick will have more low end, and it's gonna affect, let's say, the compressor in a different way. So I will need to rechange the compression on them every single time if I want to change, or I might start adding or changing, and I need to take care and think about it. What do I have on the groups, and then fix it. So it's kind of double process, and I'm really avoiding until I finish the track. When I bring my track to the end of the creative process, and when I don't want to change that much, when I'm already sure that I'm going to keep the elements that are inside of there, like the kick and the bass, the snare, whatsoever, this is the moment when I'm going to start applying. I always start these, I always do it in the same project, just I will always create a new version when I'm going to send like a mixing session, and that will give me like the name of the project. I will know exactly what I did in that channel. So that way, like just by incrementally saving every time the new sessions and every stage of the track development, if I name the projects right way, is going to keep me organized, where I'll be able to understand what I did in each session. So now, as I already said, I have 4 groups, even though it might seem it's not that obvious. If I already have 4 stems, let's say kick and bass, they're gonna go always to the bus 1 and 2. Top end will always go to the 3 and 4. Single shots will go to 7 and 8, and leads will go to 7 and 8, sorry. Single shot's supposed to go to 5 and 6, while the lead's supposed to get on 7 and 8, right? So I always have like the subgroups, because some of the elements might not be very good fit for the, let's say, top end group, and I'm going to explain why. I'm just going to go explaining the kick and the bass. So with the kick and the bass, at the beginning, when I'm in a creative process, I will definitely know that I will use the filter, definitely. And why do I want to use a filter? Because I really want to avoid to have 2 filters on, but they're doing the same thing on 2 different channels. It's like more things to work around, and etc, etc. So I really love putting one filter on the kick and bass group, and then if I change the kick or I change the bass line, I just need to send it to that group, and the automation of the filters are already working. And then after that, I can start adding certain processes. Another thing which I only use on the groups is that if I want to use any type of the sound design tricks, let's say I use the reverb RC48, and it plays mostly when the kick and bass are going to like a filter, like around this part, like. So I use in the same time like the HP filter, and I use a little bit of the reverb to create that diffusion, as in this part of the break where kick and bass stay without the low end, I want to add a little bit of the reverb just to make it to sound a bit more interesting. And this is for the sound design purposes and the track creation, so I do not have anything that's kind of processing like a compression or whatsoever. Now this group channel is being sent to bus 1 and 2, and I could directly send the kick and bass to that channel, to the bus 1 and 2, and then do the automations. But in some cases, I like to have one more master channel above them, or kind of bus, as I might apply a different processing, is I want to some type of the elements I might process differently. And the perfect example for that is on the drums, where I put all the top end, like the hi-hats, the snare, and everything from the drum section that are playing in a higher frequencies, I put to another group and then to another bus. As what I really like doing is to shave off all the peaks on the hi-hats, since a lot of hi-hats, they have a really strong transients, and I love layering them to get a different sounding combination every time, and they all kind of hitting a different types of the frequent ranges. I also use some type of the loops, etc, etc. So it's kind of a variety of different things, and most of them are very, very strong in the transients, and I really love like shaving off all these transients with the clipper or the limiter or saturation. It really does, it depends from the case to case. But the problem with that is that, in my opinion, the snare and the open hat, they really have the transients that are very, very, very important for the track energy control and the track development. So applying or shaving off the peaks on the open hat and the snare can really make everything to sound a bit more soft than it needs, while all the rest hi-hats kind of sounds very nice when they get like really shaved off the peaks. I love to keep the transients and control them differently from on the snare and on the open hat, because they can provide a huge energy burst in the track development. So now if I send everything to top end group, and then I apply like invisible limiter G2, and I do this mostly with just moving ceiling down. So now I have all these elements that are gonna be like up to minus 6.4 dB. So this is the amount of the peaks that are being shaved off. Then the open hat and the snare I like to send to that bus directly, so I don't want to shave off the peaks, and I want for the snare and open hat to avoid this group, so I'm sending it directly to the bus 3 and 4, and that way they don't get this kind of shaving off. The problem with this is that if I want to use let's say the automation of the filter like I did in this track, then the open hat and the snare will not go to that group as well. So in that case I will definitely create one subgroup where I'm going to call the hi-hats, and I'm going to send all the hi-hats beside the snare and the open hat into that hi-hats group, and then that group I'm going to send to the top end, as I want to use on the top end the filter, and on the hi-hats group I want to use the shaving off of the peaks. So with the groups we can manipulate, while with the buses we have the final results. They are 4 different groups just before they've been sent to the master channel. So at the top end, as I already said, I like to shave off the peaks, and also since this group will contain a lot of different frequency sounding elements, like the hi-hats, they're gonna be playing in the very high frequencies where we really have struggled to control, like where are the resonances. We can go in details and start looking for enormous amount of very, very thin harmonics, or not even harmonics, like the resonances, and it's really hard to control like where are the peaks. And in certain moments you can hear that there are some high frequencies that are kind of painful to our ears, specifically if you listen on the headphones. So I'm really digging all these spectral plugins, and the latest thing I did, I upgraded finally to Pro Q4, and I found out that this is something that I really like to put on my hi-hats. So I'm creating like a high shelf, and then I'm making it to be dynamic, and I control with this knob like how much I want to process it. So what it does is gonna analyze the FFT, and it's gonna find all these resonances and all these peaks, and I'm gonna start moving only them down, not the whole channel. So if I play here, so this is what it does. And if I A-B it, like, there are really some type of the small peaks or the resonances that are kind of disturbing me, and it really makes them a bit softer, more tight, more united. And if I play that in the whole mix, it's even more bigger difference. Like, it's a small difference, but still it's something that I always say, like when we do mixing, like in most cases there won't be that thing which we're gonna do and it's gonna change the track completely. So every type of the process is giving like 5 to 10% of the sound increase, and when you understand which one are giving 5% of the increase, then if you apply 3 or 4 or 5 different ones, then at the end you get like a very bigger difference. With the single shots, I don't like to add anything on top of them, like there's no need. In some cases I might add a low cut just to be safe, but in most cases I'm gonna add at the end of the track creation and the mixing. I might add on this monitoring channel or on the master, I might add like a low cut on 35 Hertz just to be sure that everything below 35 is going to be removed, as it's just a safe thing to do. And I really like to remove all the information which are not musical and that do not have much of the sense later on when we play in the clubs where we have like almost in the same level. So by clearing out that area of the low cut, or low cutting all the lowest frequencies, it's kind of making an extra space so the track will breathe more and we can push the mastering a bit louder, and we're not gonna go into the limiter that hard if we remove all these very heavy and very big information frequencies. Now on the leads, I don't like adding also much. I might add like the low cut on everything that's on side, because I really don't want to have any type of the stereo information below 200 to say. And also in some moments I might add Process C2, and I'm gonna compress only what's in the middle. I already explained this many times, but this is my way of kind of creating compensation. Like, since we already have kick and bass that are playing in the center, and they are pretty powerful and the loudest elements in our track, they're gonna occupy that space, and by compressing everything that's in center, so by this I'm creating like a compensation, like I'm really compressing what's in the center, because kick and bass there's not much of the space, and that way avoid the distortion on the master, as I'm like reducing the level or compressing everything in the center, and I'm keeping the side, because there's not many things playing on the side. I keep it intact, so the dynamic range will float and create this dynamic feeling on everything that's on side, while in the center I really like to compress it, and that way not hit the limiter that much. In the groups, like I might add, like on this main lead, I might add like Suit 2 to control all the resonances. Again, there's a filter. Again, here I have the compressor, which is just compressing what's in the mono, what's in the center. And I have this M utility plugin, because I really don't like to use my faders to automate the volume, because at the end I might want to change that when I go to mixing. And if the automation is written, I need to rewrite in the whole channel. So I might have this type of the plugins, and that way I can mute like the whole channel just by reducing the volume all the way down. And I love using this M utility, because when it's on the lowest point, I just need to find where that is. When it's on the lowest point, it's not like minus 48 dB, and then you might add like there's a really reduced level, but there's still something left on that channel, so it goes to the silence as it's written over here, so it's completely muting it down. And this way I'm avoiding of like touching my fader. And also, like, because I love using a lot of delays and reverbs, I really want in some moment everything to stop, like together with the reverbs, with the delays, etc. So it brings back the signal after it being reduced over here. And like, there's also like always, I really think that using the limiters before they hit that main group or the main bus is really smart thing to do, because I believe that if we limit slowly, or like shave off certain peaks before they are going further on, and that way the master limiter will not be that much heated by everything that's going inside of it. And I do believe that if we start reducing before that the main master or the master limiter will work way better. So there's not much of the things which I would like to add to you, except be careful, like don't make kick and bass and put a compressor on the group, because you will need the rest of the elements in order to reference how much of the compression or whatever you want to do it, even though I'm not using the compressors anymore for the low end, because everything I can do individually on the channels, like putting compressor on the kick, it does have sense if you recorded the drums, but since I already know what I'm doing, and if I want to increase the punch, I know that the transient is going to be on the high frequencies, so that means I can use the EQ and boost that, and I'm gonna get exactly the same result, as the kick is the element that's made from single harmonic waveform, and we pitch it all the way down, so it means that by increasing certain frequencies we will change the envelope of the kick by itself, as the sine wave must be at certain frequency at one point, so we cannot influence more of them in the same time, as there's no sense, since it's a sine wave that's pitching from the high frequencies to the low ones. So instead of that, I love using limiters, like I mostly use them on all the groups, like even the kick and the bass. I love putting like the limiter just before they go, and I also love to hear how the kick and bass will sound after applying the limiter, and that way if I send track to master to someone else, like I really want to know how this track will sound, or each element will sound after that mastering engineer is going to apply the limiter on top of them, because it might happen if I boost like the peaks a lot, and if I want to have like a really strong or mids in the track, it might happen that after it puts a limiter on top of them, that these informations are going to be shaved off, and I'm not going to get the same sounding effect, or it's going to change the sound of my tracks dramatically. So I want to be sure what is going to happen after the track is reaching a certain level, so I don't get any surprises and avoid any problems later on. So this is the example. I have the hi-hats. Only the close hi-hat and open hat and snare are not going to the same group, and in this group I shaved it with the clipper. So this red is what's going to be shaved. Like all these transients are just going to be shaved, and together with the leads and everything else that's going to be played in the tracks, and even the kick and bass in the Psytrance have a very strong transients. So we are dealing with a lot of transients, and I really think that compensating and removing all the peaks and shaving off these peaks from the elements that don't need them that much actually will help for a better sounding track. Otherwise it can be like too much transient heavy, where you're gonna have so many attacking information all the time, and we need to do a certain compromise in order like to make it to sound warmer and a bit better. So this was my view on the processing of the groups and on the buses. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon with another video. Bye.